Fresh and untitled.
You're up, Sue.
I'm up. Okay. Okay. I actually have a question. It's not really kind of, maybe it's about plot. I don't know. I've heard that you should always write a book, no matter what, so that it can stand alone, even if it's part of a series, because the reader hates to be left hanging.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a fan of series. If I see that a book is standalone, I'm much less likely to read it if I see a book that's part of like an 8-part series, because I love to get sucked in and like, see what this writer's got to say about this world and these people.
Yeah.
And if the book ends and there's a little bit of hanging, I'm actually okay with it, and maybe that makes me a bizarre reader.
No,
I
not
have
at
no
all.
idea.
No,
So like,
I'd say I completely agree with you. I think there's a place for both, for single volume stories and also multiple, for series. And I do like each book of a series to be able to be read individually. But I think with a series, the key is just giving enough away of the next one to keep the reader coming back, and
right.
Keeping the overarching story moving. But I wouldn't want to write an episodic novel, if that makes sense. I don't like, for the spaces between that I'm working on at the moment. Each book in that series is a very definite phase of the story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they all add up to a bigger story with a big beginning, middle, and end. And for me, that's important. But equally, I'm also trying, if I get any time, to write a few standalone novels, because I like the short snappiness of it, the fact that it's all done and dusted in one story and there's never going to be anything more. I released a book last year called Strangers, which was just exactly that. It was just quick, dirty, old school horror. Start, middle, end, one book. There's a potential for a sequel, but I don't know if I'll ever write it, because the most important thing was just this main story and getting it out.
But like, everybody wants to write a page turner. Everybody wants to write a book that flies off the shelves in Tesco and then everywhere like that. It gets a bestseller within 4 seconds. But in order to write a page turner like that, you have to throw out the whole characterization in a way, don't you? I find that books like that, their characters are very small, very wooden. I don't know what you think on that.
See, I tend to steer away from Dan Brown books in general, and that kind of thing, because it's completely anti what I like to do. And for me, a page turner is following a person or a particular group of people closely and caring about them. In my books, I'm very conscious as well that they're quite linear. There are a few of my books where we've got different groups of characters and you're just shooting off in different directions. I generally like to go for one person's perspective all the way through. And for me, that's what makes it a page turner. The fact that you're living and breathing with this person and you don't want to let them go. You just want to keep going. Particularly with a book like Straight to You, where there's a very definite event coming at some point, and it's the lead up to that. And I think to move away from the main character's story would kind of depreciate the tension a little bit. So I think it's, again, different strokes for different folks, and you have to write what you like and what you'd want to read. And really, I couldn't imagine anything worse than reading a Dan Brown book.
Hunger Games.
Yeah. I
don't know if you've read that because it's YA. I've read it, and because I have a degree in psychology, and that third book does an amazing job of describing PTSD in the main character, and it's something I've never seen done in a series ever, where in the first book you have this strong, beautiful, likable main character, and by the third book that main character is a shell, is gone, is ruined, is scarred physically, mentally, psychologically. And I love that. Like, instead of building this character up from book 1 to book 3, it's just completely, let's tear her down. And I don't know if I'm twisted, but I do like that. And you do see the story from her eyes and her eyes only from book 1 to book 3. So you can see what did it, and when she starts getting damaged, and when her thought process starts breaking down. And I couldn't imagine writing something like that, like staying in a character's head for every single scene for 3 books. Like how you do that, I'd go insane probably, because you have to almost become that character.
Yeah, and I was going to say pretentious then about how it can hurt, because it can. And I know that I did that with the Hater books. I took Danny McCoy to hell, and then a little bit more of hell after that. And yeah, it's quite traumatic, particularly with Hater, because the characters that you're rooting for are despicable bastards, really. And you find yourself cheering them on to do things that really you should not be cheering anybody to do. And it's difficult. You can but I think if it wasn't difficult, it wouldn't be believable. It wouldn't be plausible. If any of my stuff is plausible, I think you have to go through that to an extent. And I love it. I really like to put a character through hell and look at what they were. And again, this is different to what we were saying before. I'm not looking at what the characters learned or what lessons they've gone through or what they've achieved. I'm just looking at what they've become, and maybe judging the whole apocalypse through the before and after of this character. That's what I like to do. I like just to see how far I can push people and torture people and manipulate people. It's all very twisted.
In your writing, not in your
just generally.
Generally.
I'm like a lot of writers. I think you get a group of writers who are really pretentious and full of themselves and who've usually achieved very little. But I'm always really self-conscious, and I doubt every single word that I write, and I can't believe that people buy these things and that people enjoy these things. I'm thinking, gee, really, that's just some shit I knocked out at home, and it's great. And I think you get such a buzz. I personally get such a buzz from talking to people about my books. There's no bigger thrill, I think, than being at a convention or something and just having a table full of books, and somebody will come past and pick one up. Oh yeah, I've read that. I enjoyed that. And then they think, oh shit, you're the author. You wrote this. And I just can't. I will never get enough of that. But I'm personally so insecure about my writing that I can't believe that it ever happens.
I've actually come to think that those kind of people are the best. Who will go the furthest, because I remember reading a quote from, it was either Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep, that she can't believe to this day, can't even believe why people are still watching films with her in it. And I kind of go, whoa, that's like me every day. Like, every time I write, I'm like, oh my god, what am I inflicting on the world, you know?
I think that everything, every viewpoint, every word that somebody writes has value, and I mean, I can't dismiss it. I'm no great authority, and I'd hate to criticise somebody. I've written some unbearable shit. The first version of Straight to You is just embarrassing. I open that book up now and think, what? Did I actually think this was good at some point? But I think you have to make mistakes to learn, don't you?
I got to meet my favorite writer, like the guy who inspired me to write, and I was so excited, and I got to meet him, and I was just like, wow, it's an honor to meet you. And he's like, okay, and signed the book. And I was like, just like after that, I was just like, wow, like I'm never reading another one of your books again.
See,
like
I would absolutely hate to be like that. Fortunately, I had a better experience. I got to meet James Herbert. You know, James Herbert. He died a couple of years ago now, but the year before he died, when he released his last book, Ash, I was lucky enough to be asked to host his 2 UK events, did one in Birmingham and one in London. And I got to spend some time with him before we started. And that they say never meet your idols, but sometimes it can go really well. And he was just such an inspiration. And in the space of the half hour that we were talking together, he taught me so much, not about writing really, but about how to be a writer in public. Because, you know, if I do a signing, 2 or 3 people turn up and I'm happy. That's cool. You know, I've done signings when there's just been me and the staff at the store. But James Herbert, the night that I did an event with him, I think both times we had about 250 people, and he was really cool about it. He said, this is nothing. I've had thousands. And you think, wow. But just watching that guy work and how he spoke to everybody and how he took time to talk to everyone, sign their books, tell the last person in the queue. We finished the Q&A and the interview at about 9 o'clock, and he was still signing books at nearly midnight. And the last person in the queue had got a little shopping trolley absolutely full of first edition James Herberts. And the guy, James Herbert, was in his 70s by this stage. But he sat there, patient as anything, with his Jack Daniels on the go, and he just signed every single book and engaged with this guy. And I learned really early on that I think for a writer, the most important thing is the readers. If you haven't got readers that care, and if you don't engage with them, then you're shouting into the wind. Nobody's going to listen. That's kind of what the philosophy that got me to do what I did with Autumn way back in the day, because the first edition of Straight to You had been out and sold absolutely bugger all, sold nothing really, and rightly so. And so when I finished Autumn, I thought, well, what do I do with it? Do I try and find another publisher and get maybe a handful of sales again, or do I just give it away and try and build up a readership? And that for me was key. It was about getting people interested in my books. So that's really the approach that I've taken from then on. It's like, unbelievably, it's about 15, 16 years ago since I started giving that book away online. But really, I think if you haven't got a readership, what's the point of writing?
I think like the main thing, and it's with every profession, like an actor, anything like that, you know, where people get so huge and put up on their pedestals. The one thing to remember is there was always a day, if you're a writer, a really best-selling, amazing author, and everybody coming to have books signed, one thing to always remember is there was a day when you wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
Not when you were a writer, when you wanted to be a writer, you know.
Absolutely.
And that will keep you right back down again.
Yeah. No, really important thing to remember, yeah.
So what words of advice would you have to keep a writer going?
I think people who really want to write don't need words of advice, because I think that it's just something within you that you have to do. I know that's always been the case with me. No matter what's been going on at home or at work or anywhere in my life, there's always been writing, and there always will be writing. I think write for yourself is what I'd say. And if you're lucky enough that sells, then that's great, but that's not the most important thing. I think for me, it can be a really cathartic process at times. You know, I've looked back, I've had dodgy moments, and I've looked back at the books that I wrote at that time, and I think, wow, there's me screaming at myself to do something about the position I'm in, and not really seeing it. And it's only in retrospect that you look back and you think, oh, I wasn't in a good place there, or that was when things were going particularly well or badly. Yeah, it's more selfish than it feels, I think, writing sometimes. And my advice would be, do it for yourself, and if other people like it, then that's a real bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I know that other writers will just write commercial stuff with a view to getting as many copies sold as possible, but personally I couldn't write something I don't care about.
I've always been told that the biggest mistake a writer can do is fall in love with either a story or a character, you know, whichever it is.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
To fall in love with them?
Yeah, not like literally like, oh, I want to marry my imaginary friend, but like you get so involved, like that you love this story. It's a part of you, and I don't know, sharing not your soul, but like, you know, you're sharing something that like you created out of just something that was inside of you, like you said, that like you couldn't help it, and you love this story or this character.
Yeah.
And they say that you shouldn't do that. And
I don't know if I'd agree with that. I really love Danny McCoy, the lead character in the Hater books, because he's such a dick. He's such an idiot. He just happens to be in the wrong place at the right time, and I have a genuine affection for the bloke. And at the risk of sounding like a complete tosser, I when I got to the end of his story, I cried like a baby. It's pathetic, but it's true, because I do get that attached. And I think you have to. For me, I have to have that attachment. Again, it comes back to caring. I think if I don't care about the story, if I don't care about the character, then I can't write the book. But that said, I also know that I can't be too precious about them. I know I'm going to put. Well, I guess it helps knowing that I'm going to put them through hell at the start of the book,
Right.
And that things generally aren't going to end well for them. But yeah, I think for me, having some attachment to the characters is important.
I think so too, because I think the more attached you are to them, the more life you give them.
Yeah.
And like a reader can sense that. Like, I've read books where it's so dull that it's like turning the page, it's a chore. And then I've read some books where like in 5 minutes I've turned 30 pages.
Yeah. It's not necessarily about being attached to your characters. It's about having a reaction to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can absolutely love them or absolutely hate them, but they've got to make you feel something.
Danny McCoy, very Irish name. Is he Irish?
It was just a completely trumped up name, and I don't know where he's from, to be honest.
That shows how much you do into your character background.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, this is how vague I am with descriptions and things. I didn't base them in real towns or real places. I just made up cities. But then, yeah, further into the books, into the Hater books in particular, I started moving it into real locations. But I like the vagueness of making somewhere up, or rather, it's the opposite of that. I wouldn't like to write about somewhere where something could change and that would render my book invalid. An example, a really old example. Remember Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films? The very first one, which came out, I think, in late 2001. The teaser trailer for that was Spidey spinning a web between the Twin Towers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then, of course, by the time the film came out, they were no more. And that just made me think, you know, why write about specific locations which might change?
And it's the same with mentioning, like, say, a certain make of car, a make of phone, a make of laptop, anything like that. I have this, like, cringe factor that comes into me when I'm trying to talk about a phone or something. I'm like, do I say telephone? Do I say mobile? Do I say cell phone? What do I say? How do I keep it so vague that it will be timeless?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's something that I'm very conscious of doing as well. You don't want to tie yourself down with details like that, but that can backfire on you as well, because the first Hater book I wrote, I think 2005, 2006, when obviously we had the internet, but it wasn't as all-consuming as it is now. So Danny McCoy and his family aren't online, and they never check the internet, and they never get emails. They do in the film that I've just written a script for, but they don't in the original novels. And people now say, well, why didn't you just look online and see what was going on outside? So you can equally date your novels by not including details. But I kind of get away with that by writing about the world going to shit. So all electricity is gone and all telecommunications are down anyway. So it's really about people just relying on their basic instincts.
I have this ongoing argument with a friend of mine. I always say that, like, the worst part of the hardest part of the zombie apocalypse is pretending I'm not excited about it.
I've got a T-shirt with that very quote on it.
But he's always saying, like, oh, this movie, or like Walking Dead or anything like this, and he's always going on about it and saying, like, wouldn't they know you should only shoot the head? And I'm like, dude, you have to think of it as if we've never heard of a zombie before.
Yeah.
Do you know? And he's always going, oh, well, we know that you have to, like, sever their spinal cord and all this shit. And I'm like, well, what if it's something else? You know, what if when the zombie apocalypse happens, you have to sever their left leg at the knee? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, we never knew this. It's never come up.
You know, but that's a really interesting point. Because going back to the autumn books, I wrote the first autumn book in 2001, and then they certainly weren't as everywhere like they are now. There was no Walking Dead. It was just when Brian Keane was just about to release the Rising, and David Wellington was doing Monster Planet, Monster Nation, and my book came out at the same time, and I think before that there wasn't really a zombie subgenre. So in the first Autumn book, when the dead rise, the few survivors that are together are thinking, well, what the hell's going on here? And they actually get one of the dead and take them into the community centre where they're hiding out, and kind of prod it and poke it and watch its reactions and trying to work out what's going on. And nobody mentions Shaun of the Dead or Day of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead, because at the time it was the done thing to act ignorant and just pretend that nobody knew what a zombie was. But now I think I'm conscious that all the zombie stuff that I've written in the last few years, it kind of references other zombie material because it is so mainstream now. So somebody might make some throwaway comment like, shoot it in the head. Well, I can't shoot it in the head. Well, that's what they do in The Walking Dead. But yeah, but this is real life, that kind of thing. So it's interesting how your stories and your approach, I think, get moulded a bit by current events or current likes and dislikes. It's such a cliched term, isn't it, zombie, though, that I cringe a little bit when I hear it. And there's a brilliant scene in Shaun of the Dead. I don't know if you remember it, when on the day that when they get up and Shaun and Ed are in the flat and they're looking through the letterbox, and Ed says to Shaun, how many zombies are out there? And then Shaun turns around and says, don't say that. Don't use the Z word. Because it just does sound ridiculous, doesn't it? It's become such a cliche that you can't use it. In fact, when the Autumn books were re-released in the UK, part of the marketing material said without ever using the Z word. And we never used it in the whole series. Six books, and I never used the Z word once. And I'm very proud of that.
Good job.
Thank you. Being British, we would, I think we would deny that the apocalypse was here, even when we were burning. We'd still try and carry on and with a stiff upper lip and all that bullshit. And I think that if there was a zombie apocalypse, people would just refuse to accept it until they'd seen it in the Daily Mail or something. They just wouldn't believe that it was happening. So I think there's an element of not wanting to accept what you can see, and you can play around with that. Don't say that. Don't use the Z word.